In a homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. So greetings and good afternoon. The third session, and we're into the foundations of the basic Buddhist culture, introductions, which is going very well. We've had an international viewing, about 134 views from as far apart as Canada, America, Ireland, England, Kuwait and Thailand, Burma, and Malaysia, and most of all, Philippines, which is where we are in Manila. So we're going to have a look at the Four Foundations of Mindfulness, an introduction and explanation about how the Four Foundations of Mindfulness work in practice and in theory and applied practice and daily life. But about the Five Aggregates and the theory, which is necessary to understand the Buddhist teachings, dependent origination, we're going to have a look through, and then various other key aspects and tools to help learn and understand deeper. So I put up some things which we're going to cover over. A manual by Mahasi Sayadaw, very, very useful. It's a series of talks based on one of the main teachings of the Buddha, the 8th book in the middle length sayings called the Saleka Sutta, about self-effacement, about making yourself unarrogant. Secondly, I'd like to have a look at the tradition, how all of this teaching was passed down. Now we're into a beautiful time of digital globalization where we can instantly access all the teachings. It hasn't always been the way. This teaches about how the inscriptions were transcribed onto palm leaf and how this was preserved. So it's a short documentary about that. Basics of Buddhist culture comes from the heart of Yangon, and some of the main masters of Myanmar, Burma, called U Pandita Sayadaw, and he's produced a book called The Basics of Buddhist Culture, and levels 1 and 2. So that is a very good standard text for understanding about the build-up level to get stable understanding, and bring also to be able to call yourself Buddhist, what is actually involved in that. That's one part. Next, access to insight, because what I'd like to do is to introduce this excellent tool written by Tanisaro Bhikkhu, American monk, who smoothed out and made accessible the ancient Buddhist texts in a very, very easy to use way, easy to read and free to download and comfortable English. A lot of the original texts were translated by people who were Oxford scholars from Victorian Christian training, and the language is quite old-fashioned. So his isn't, it's smooth, easy to comprehend American English. This is an important book. It's called the Visuddhimagga, and it has there are a series of books that led one to another. And this tracing the books is very important because many of the main teachings nowadays, particularly the ones that come out of Burma, like Goenka Ji and his master Ubar Kim, Mahasi Sayadaw, and all of the other main masters from that lineage, U Pandita, Chenme Sayadaw, Tejaniya, many of these teachers, their teaching stems to Vimuttihimagga. Vimuttihimagga is a pathway. Vimutti is freedom. So it's the path to freedom, which is want to experience and not to be a slave, not to be bound and caught under the conditions which are going to make us feel unfree. So the Vimuttihimagga, a very ancient book, and it's a meditation manual. Now, you don't find that in the Buddha's time. They're more stories about what happened. Whereas the Visuddhimagga is a how-to-do-it manual, how to recognize a good teacher, what places are good to go to, what to avoid. So it might say, for example, if you find a place and all the monks are doing construction work, don't stay there because it would be too noisy. So very, very basic ABC instructions on important things like food and the kind of conditions for the right, how quiet it should be and so on, how to find a good place, and then what to do. So it's very good reference, because otherwise you go to a meditation center and often you'll blindly follow what you're told. So this is good that you can read through and check against what you see in there, against what you find in those places. This Vimutti-magga is linked to a very popular book called the Visuddhimagga. This is one of the one you may hear about. It's much thicker. It's like a telephone directory thick, very, very thick. But the authors of that were a team that traveled down from India and based it on this book. This was written by one person and tends to be a bit smoother and easier. It's got nice illustrations, descriptions, and stories, and it's thinner. So it's written by a fully enlightened monk, and this was written by a team. Interestingly enough, there is a recording of a Sri Lankan, and it was recording them with 3 years old, and he recalls being with the monks who did this book, and this book was written more than 2,000 years ago. So he's a father and auntie. They recorded him because he was suddenly sitting up when he was very young, 3 years old, and he was chanting these extra long chants that are very, very complex and difficult chants. I couldn't do them. No way I'd be able to do them. It would spend a year trying to remember something like these. And he's now grown up. He's now about 55 years old or so. And he describes how this happened to him, how he remembers from a past life during that time being a member of the team who transferred the books from India down to Sri Lanka. So it's a very interesting story. Can even play some of the recording of him chanting because it was recorded, and there are interviews where he explains about that time. This is a very ancient books, these two. This one is a contemporary book. There's a recent man called Daniel Ingram, claims to be fully enlightened, quite controversial. But the good thing about him is he just cuts through all of the culture. So when he talks about meditation, he doesn't bring in all of too much decoration. He just is only interested in people using the meditation to achieve what it's supposed to achieve without any nonsense. But his way of describing and discussing things can be very, very direct, too direct for a lot of people. But in my eyes, it's quite good to listen to at least one person who does this straight cut-through effect. So he's very frank about attainment and about progress and so on, like this. And also bogus paths, which is one of the main things, which is the wrong aims, false aims. People meditate just to improve to have fists of steel or kung fu swing or something like, or lose weight or something which aren't really connected directly with the main aim of meditation, those kind of things. Facebook, worth clocking on and joining on so that we can add as we are filming and uploading these, so you can be added to the group and be able to review some of the video. This is a book called The Questions of King Milinda, an actual Bactrian Greek king who had so many doubts and questions about spiritual life and went to an arahant, fully enlightened monk, and cross-questioned him on all the key issues which cover the story of the theory of the Buddhist teachings. So all existential suffering, the nature of the soul, of rebirth, of karma, of many, 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 many questions. And they're very, very bright, clear questions that are often echo the kind of one things that we have on our mind. You can have a person really become a dog. Can a dog become a hamster? Hamster become a bat and backwards again, or whatever, you know. So lots of questions, lots of very rapid, clear answers, brief answers as well. Nice and readable, quite funny in places. nice and easy to read. Skilling questions, the Buddha taught how to ask questions in order that you're going to get the best results like this. And this using wisdom to dissect. Wisdom cannot be itself dissected. That's why it's compared to a diamond created under great pressure. But a wisdom should be able to dissect and therefore know. It's one of the key enlightenment factors. So this teaches about how to do that. Got some images to show you here, both about cultivation and also about defilement. Defilement is a very important thing to understand what's meant by defilement, which spoils a person's character. It ruins their opportunity of spiritual enlightenment, makes them greedy, makes them hateful, makes them jealous person. These are defilements, the pollutants of the mind, things that spoil the character to make someone conceited and arrogant, egoistic, or doubtful, or crippled by lack of confidence, or unfriendly, or too shy, or whatever it is that makes them not be able to achieve the full potential of their path. Great Chronicles of the Buddhas. This is a very useful manual for reading about previous Buddhas, where in the teaching of one man 2,500 or 600 years ago, we still relying on the teaching he gave. But he wasn't the first. There were Buddhas who were on the earth before him. And this lists at least 24 of them and details about the legends of their lives, as well as many other things, many details about the Buddha's life, actually from his birth, and then things that happened every year, every summer, as he met people, as he went on teaching, as he got enlightened, and so on. All the different things happened right up to his death, and then after his death, and all the drama that unfolded when he died. This is an accompanying book, which is very useful, written by Mingun Sayadaw. Mingun Sayadaw, Colossal Photographic Memory. In the Guinness Book of Records, able to remember the whole 84,000 chapters of the Buddhist teachings. And he's then made a commentary on this. So he's been the one who's written this, requested by the Prime Minister of Burma. And then he's written another book which comments and analyzes such things as all the different aspects of charitable giving, material giving, immaterial giving, giving your time, giving your experience, giving physical things, to who, how much, when is it good, when is it bad? Should you do it with the idea of reward or not? How do you do that? So all the different things which cover subject of charitable giving, and then other things as well, one by one, but in very, very great detail, because he had the huge memory to withdraw from all the different parts of the Buddhist teachings. He'd memorize it. About the five aggregates, I've created a map in order to fill in some of the gaps of the Buddhist teachings. And we're going to take a look at that map later on. It looks a little bit complicated at first sight, but it boils down to having awareness of the body, awareness of the feelings on the body, of pleasant and unpleasant feelings on the body, pleasant and unpleasant moods of the mind, our perceptions, and then wholesome states of mind and unwholesome states of mind, such things as hate, restlessness, and jealousy, and some of these kind of things, and how to transform them into their opposites, and therefore purify the experience. So this is a brief description, and here are the 6 sense doors. So this is the key. The 4 foundations of mindfulness are more or less covered here, most of it, and the 5 aggregates. So it's a very, very key teaching, and it's usually just described verbally, or it's described as a list. So a graphic like this is something you don't see that often, not in the Theravada teaching. It's usually originally verbally translated, transmitted, and then later written down on the palm leaf scripts. But it wasn't usually painted unless it was a mural on the wall, and often then it became quite elaborate. And in other countries, that becomes very elaborate, like Tibetan and Bhutan, where you start to get paintings of deities floating in the sky, and then it gets more characterized. So then also a few recordings to play to you. And I think that's introduction enough for now. So I'd like to start off just by that we can appreciate a little bit about the tradition. So there's a very important part where a lot of people are lay teaching now. It's a very contemporary fashion in the US, for example. So I think if I just give you an introduction about the way that the teachings have been transmitted and a little bit about the Theravada background, lineage, you can get a sort of sense of the responsibility and also the beauty of the tradition as well, and its ancient nature. And then we start to see some of the things that the strange little dramas that show up in the King Milinda's questions, or what it is that's being passed down in this culture, or meditation manuals that they've been passed down by this ancient technique. You get an appreciation of nature of the Theravada form as well, especially now. These new days, new times, especially here in the Philippines, where it's almost certainly currently brand new. It may have been here before the Spanish came and sort of dominated religion. But as far as we're aware, we're trying to put some feelers out, but there's almost no Theravada teachings here in the Philippines. And this is a very exciting time. We call like sort of frontier exploring time. So I'd like to show you about how the tradition has been transmitted to some countries from Sri Lanka across to Thailand, Burma, Laos, Cambodia, Vietnam, which is featured in this, which is about the palm leaf transcription. So all of the teachings that I've received and I can share with you have come down through that technique. So I'd like to show you a little bit about that as an introduction to this. And this will just be on the audio of the, actually it won't, I'll be reading it out. It's just a narrated documentary. The cursor keeps jumping around, it's got a mind of its own. Actually, I can't find this documentary. It doesn't seem to be on YouTube anymore. That's where it came from. Since the founding of Buddhism 2,000 years ago, the religion has fostered a unique culture in the subcontinent of Central and South Asia, a culture in which Pali scriptures, the gathas and monasteries present eternal themes. In Manchu Man, village Xinjiang in China's Yunnan province, there's an old man called Kala Langchao who can often be seen making his way to a grove outside the village where he takes leaves from palm trees. He boils the leaves, drives them under the sun, and amazingly carves Buddhist scriptures into them. What he's working on is Pali leaf scriptures. This craftsman is inscribing what scriptures has been practiced for at least 1,000 years. In its time before the invention of paper, people discovered that when properly treated, the leaves of the pali tree, a sacred tree in Buddhism, were waterproof and insect resistant. So they developed the tradition of inscribing these leaves with Buddhist scriptures. Making Buddhist scriptures is an ancient craft that is one now facing extinction as modern printing techniques are increasingly used to print Buddhist scriptures. Some of Kang Lao's Pali scriptures will be presented to the temple at the request of the villagers, but master tourists added in a culture with which they are unfamiliar. unfamiliar. The craft of copying scriptures faces extinction in Cambodia. But Barya is a Buddhist monk. During the war years in the 1970s, numerous Pali scriptures in Cambodia were destroyed, and today, familiar techniques required to produce them are becoming fewer and fewer. In this capacity, as Bhararati Temple teaches temple monks and laymen how to copy scratches of scriptures onto the leaves. Meanwhile, others are working hard to save ancient Pali scriptures that have been more or less preserved to the present age. While Cambodians are engaged in reconstruction, they're also in need of rebuilding their spiritual life. As Pali scriptures are repositories of the invaluable historical and cultural information, rescuing that survived the war has come an urgent task. After the war, Benwar made a living by making Pali after he had to study Buddhist scriptures. One day, a foreign tourist asked him if he knew anything about Buddhist scriptures written on Pali leaves. It was an encounter that would leave Lingan along the path of saving the ancient Pali scriptures. He began to search for Pali scriptures in the hope of extracting the historic and cultural information contained in them before they were reduced to ashes. Recorded in Pali scriptures are not only Buddhist doctrines, but also legends and records of historical events. And so the study of Pali scriptures is important documents, as in the study of the history of the various countries of the sub-region. Over the last dozen years, Ling Goran and his colleagues have visited 88 temples in Phnom Penh and Kendal provinces in search of Pali scriptures. As part of this quest, at present they're going from village to village in the rural areas of Kong Pong Cheng province. And in each house they visit, they will search every corner, even under the stairs. And as soon as they find any Pali scriptures, they immediately sort through them with care. The members of the temple, they explain the importance of the Pali scriptures to the temple monks. After many years of war, numerous Pali scriptures disappeared from public sight and does not know what happened to them. Ling Gorhan and his colleagues urge the temple monks to preserve the palm leaf scriptures as well, so that they can exist for future studies. Some villagers in Kongcham province have told Lingohan a story about some Pali scriptures. It seems that one night, around 20 years ago, it was approaching a village in Kampong Chen province. The village's temple was learned one monk who knew the value of the Pali scriptures in his care. And so he asked the villagers to move the Pali scriptures out of the temple and hide them in their houses. These ancients saved the scriptures from destruction. But then Lingoran arrives at the temple, Tera village. He finds that the monk has already been dead several years. He pays respects to his preserved remains. At that time, the Venerable Mark had great courage to take the action he did, and the villagers still talk about his deeds as of telling a story from the Buddhist scriptures. Because of the monk's foresight, Tera Temple has been able to preserve a huge quantity of Pali scriptures. It is, in fact, the largest collection of them that has been seen in the 17 years engaged in this sort of thing. Contain many classics from which we can learn from many strange stories. They are reference materials for our studies. In Sanskrit, the word for pagoda means tomb, reflecting the fact that the original function of Tera mosques was to retain the ashes of the relics of the Buddha. After Shakyam died, 8 were built in India to retain his relics. During the reign of King Ashok, the ashes and relics of Buddha were divided into 84,000 portions, and pagodas of the same color were built to retain and preserve them. With first, the pagodas became a spiritual symbol of Buddhism, and as Buddhism was introduced to other regions, large numbers of Buddhist pagodas began to appear. In this subregion, the architecture of Buddhist pagodas reached its zenith. The most famous group of pagodas is to be seen in Pagan, built of bricks in the 11th century. More than 2,000 of these Buddhas stand along the Ayawadi River over an area of 4,000 square kilometers. Here, a Buddhist temple serves not only as a venue for religious activities, but also as a museum, school, theatre, hospital, and market. People are late for the temple and almost linked to the temple with almost all aspects of their lives, from weddings, works, doing business, and even settling conflicts among neighbors. Moreover, all major festivals are seated around the temple, to say nothing of many solemn prayers offered there. Within this area, every village has its own best Buddhist temple and pagoda. While it is true they are religious sanctuaries, they are also. Sorry, I move on because the documentary is quite long, but it gives you an introduction about. There's a question. Gives you an introduction to subjects and an appreciation of like how ancient what we're dealing with is. These are images I've collected which represent one of the main aims, which is cultivation. So the cultivation of wisdom, the cultivation of purity, and the recognizing of what is meant by defining of what is meant by unwholesome, the prevention of any more unwholesomeness re-arising, because those all cause suffering and they cause cloudiness of life. They cause mistakes as well. They're going to have dark consequences, troublesome consequences, chaotic consequences, disharmony and disorder. So the basic truth that the Buddha was originally teaching was this truth of suffering, which is all those I just described: sorrow, distress, pain, angst, existential suffering, as well as loss and this kind of suffering. So preventing that from arising, the Buddha defined craving as the main cause for this, wishing for things to be otherwise, and being separated from what we love and being with what we don't love. So these things, the Buddha said, we're trying to cultivate qualities which enable us to be with what is, to have equanimity and calm with the way things actually are, and to gain insight and wisdom into the causes of our suffering. So we're going to look at some of those things today. Just say this is imagery, so we can start to look to what's meant by the inner teachings, the inside of the teachings, not only the form. We've just seen some things about the ancient form and its history. So there are tools which enable us to go deeper into the teaching. So I'd like to share some of those with you, but we need to define what it is that we are talking about. So one of the things is to define what is meant actually by defilements a little bit deeper, because defilements are the things that spoil, and here we have some recognizable types of badness, of just polluted type behavior and polluted actions, killing. So the main 5 precepts that should be kept and are taken on by us ourselves, and therefore life gets better for us and everyone else. When we protect other people, firstly is not to kill and act harmlessly. Second is not to steal and not to take that which is given because of the distress it causes. So these are called by hate and greed. This is adultery and all the types of cruel conduct with sensuality, including rape and pedophilia and all the different kinds of immoral, cruel conduct with regard to sense pleasure. Then there's speech, lying and misinformation. And it's not the only one. There are 4 kinds. Another is gossip, gossip, and also making false allegations, which causes great distress. So also foul language and abusive speech, and just using foul language. And then nonsense talking, just empty, rambling nonsense that it doesn't benefit anyone. Then there are things such as covetousness, like clinging onto objects, and then maliciousness, just cruel conduct, and just nasty behavior like this. Then we have also various different kinds of hatreds, the various different kinds of covetous love as well, delusion and pride. So these are recognizable things which cause confusion, which cause us to feel lost, which cause us to feel arrogant and superinflated and having wrong views. So clarifying and purifying about all these helps us to be free of illusions and see ourselves as we actually are, instead of heading off into nowhere, chasing dreams that don't really exist. So it's very much a path which is pragmatic and realistic and encourages people to shed wrong views and then to find the right path. This noble eightfold path leads to liberation. So all of these were clarified by the Buddha, and with techniques of meditation. So before we go on to cover all of those, just a little thing I want to share with you that also brings the teachings more to life. And I've got a lot of material that I'd like to share, so forgive me if I'm going to take a little bit of a sampler from each little bit to that people can also then get an appetite for wanting to investigate it for further. So we're going to get a little bit bookish now and look at a couple of things. I want to have a look at the basic Buddhism to show you what kind of things are involved with that. So when we study Buddhism, what is it that we actually start to look at? So some of these kind of studies are very important, which are, there's a famous sutta which is called the Mangala Sutta. Mangala means good fortune. So what kind of things to do in order that the next autumn, next spring, next summer are going to be happy ones? So blameless deeds and what that means, and thinking about disadvantages and taking intoxicants, what is meant by a respectable person, so that you associate with them and avoid fools, and what's meant by a fool, what's meant by wise. So for example, fool, you might be being very judgmental, but it's not actually an unuseful thing to do. So like if someone is a gangster or a playboy or a playgirl, it's going to ruin your reputation and pull you off into wasting your time. And for example, or if somebody is a gangster and they love to fight and they'll encourage you to be someone who gets into gangs and fighting, we all probably have crossed paths with either those people or friends of friends who take people off and basically encourage them in the defilements, which we had a quick look at. So if they encourage hate in them, or if they encourage greed or desire or excessive passion in them, we'll take them away from peacefulness. Then these two things, if it increases ego in them to really make them inflated in these ways. So these are the kind of things we look for. People encourage gambling in their friends as well. So these are the kind of studies that make studying Buddhism a clear science as well. It should be a science of cause and effect, according to the way that the Buddha taught. So these are really clarified here. What is the Buddha? What is Dharma? What is Sangha? What is Buddhism? And they're given very nice and stable, straightforward answers, like what actually are the 5 precepts when you're taking on those 5 rules in detail, and why, what's the consequences of not following them, 8 precepts or more, 9 precepts, and so on. So these are guidelines that also are very suitable for lay people. It's not only for monks and nuns and people living in monasteries, but people in cultures that we've seen, such as Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, Burma, and Sri Lanka, and so on. They will be very familiar with what is meant by, like, what were the 9 special qualities of the Buddha that made him so very different? Or what were the 6 special qualities of the Dharma? So studies like this one, which are freely available, are very, very useful to have a good look at, so that we have a good grounding before getting into too much deep Dharma, deep teachings, deep meditation, in order to have a good, stable understanding of also what's expected of a layperson, and what benefits can be achieved. So you've got all these kind of benefits of alms giving, benefits of generosity, the 4 practices of harmony. People finally, they got very strenuous home situation. These kind of things are good looking at. So very clear guidelines, often enumerated, numbered like this, which makes them easy to remember. So this is just a quick look at that, because we've got quite a few things to look over. I like to divide the time over the step by step. Let's have a quick look at the King Milinda's questions and see a kind of things that are said in that. So King Milinda goes up to this monk Nagasena. They exchange friendly greetings, took his respectfully to one side, and then Milinda says to himself, "What is your name, and what are your name?" "I'm a king. I am known as Nagasena." Critically, it says that, but that is only a designation in common use, for no permanent individual can be found. This is one of the main teachings of the Buddha, that although we have a past and a present and a future, there's no we, which is continually goes on and on and on. We feel like there is, but that when we examine closely now into experience, we can't find this one individual. We just find change and a process which is changing and changing and changing. And this is what the Buddha started to focus in on as looking for truth, right? That the Milinda called one of the Bactrian Greeks and the monks to bear witness. And he says, this is all of his entourage who come with him. And he says, this Nagasena, this monk says that no permanent individual is implied in his name. Is it possible to approve of that? Then he turned to Nagasena. He's going to take him apart and said, if by most venerable Nagasena that is true, who is it that gives you robes, food and shelter? Who lives the righteous life? Or again, who kills beings? Who lives the righteous life? Or again, who kills living beings, steals? So it means there's no criminals then who commit adultery. Who is it? If there's no one, nobody did anything, who tells lies, takes strong drink? So then he goes on, you say that you are called Nagasena. Now, what is that Nagasena? Is it the hair of the head that is Nagasena? Like your hairstyle? I don't say that, great king. Are you the nails, the teeth, the skin, or the parts of the body? Are you those things? Are you your ribs? Are you your back? Are you a shoulder? Certainly not. Or is it the feeling, the body feelings? Is it the perceptions that is Nagasena? Is it the mind states? Is it all these things combined, or is it something outside of them that is Nagasena? It is none of these. Then ask as I may, I can ask and discover no Nagasena. Nagasena is an empty sound. Who is it we see before us? Is it a falsehood that your reverence has spoken? So then the Nagasena, who's been sitting quietly listening, says, you, sir, have been reading great luxury as becomes your noble birth. How did you become here, in a chariot or by foot? Then explain, sir, what is that? Is it the axle? Is it the wheels? Is it the chassis or the reins or the yoke that is the chariot? Is it all of them combined, or is it something apart from them? It is none of these things, venerable sir. Then this chariot is an empty sound. You spoke falsely when you said you came here in a chariot. You are a great king of India. You are afraid of, who are you afraid of, that you don't speak the truth? Then he called upon those same Greeks that were standing around and the monks to bear witness. This King Milinda said that he came in a chariot, but when asked what it is, he's unable to show it. Is it possible to prove of that? He's doubled him back again. And then the 500 Bactrian Greeks shouted their approval and said to the king, get out of that if you can. Twisted him into his corner. Venerable sir, I have spoken the truth. It is because I have all these parts that it comes under the term chariot. Very good, sir, your majesty has rightly grasped the meaning. Even so, it's because of the 32 kinds of organic matter in a human body and the 5 aggregates of being that I come under the term Nagasena. As it was said by Sister Vajira in the presence of the Buddha, the Blessed One, just as it is by the existence of the various parts that the word chariot is used, just so is it that when aggregate of being are there, we talk of a being. Most wonderful Nagasena, most extraordinary, you have solved this puzzle, difficult though it was. If the Buddha himself were here, he would approve of your reply. King Milinda went up to Nagasena, said, exchange greetings, and went off. So that's the kind of touche, ding, 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 kind of, that all through this, they have these kind of debates where they tease out and try to find out what's the truth. So I made some, they're a very important thing. I made some slides to show you in order to help to understand the core teachings. I'll have a look through these. The core teaching mainly the 4 foundations of mindfulness, the 5 aggregates, and the 12 steps of dependent origination, which means nothing when you say it just like that. The 4 foundations of mindfulness, it means this. When you're going to try to establish mindfulness in your own experience so that your mind is clear enough to know, is it causing trouble? Does it have anger? Does it have desire? Does it have ego? It must know that, and that's what mindfulness does. Then it can start to read its own weather. It can start to tell, is the mind in trouble? Is it still? Is it calm? Am I doing well? Am I causing trouble? Or something like this. So the 4 foundations of mindfulness is a way to be able to practice and look into our experience and clearly see it. Same with the 5 aggregates. Means we can, when it says there's no self, what does that mean? Well, it means we can look into the meaning of body, and then we can see a self there. within, can we look into the feelings and find a self there within, or is it all just changing? Can we look into our perceptions and training and find, is there a self in there, or is it also just changing? The states of mind, like doubts, like there may be doubts right now, but earlier on you felt good, or you might feel really good now, but earlier on you have doubts, anxiety, or calm, these states of mind that change. It's just one of them. You've got one or two of them. There's many of these states of mind. And also in what we see, are we the one who sees? Or are we the one who hears? Are we the one who thinks? Can we find one, a real one, that's in there? So built up some useful ways of looking at that. So one of the ones is this map. Is the map. It's a little bit busy when you first see it. Very quickly here. Repeat, this is body. So your awareness lands on the body and finds that you're standing, or it finds that you're sitting, or it finds that you're blinking, or sniffing, or coughing, or it finds that there's hardness there, just where you're pressing down. It finds there's temperature there. So these are the kind of undeniable things that we're basing on. So the awareness goes there. And awareness comes from this mind states, attention, and a focal area. So the focal area looks and it finds, oh, I'm standing, or I'm sitting, or I'm blinking, or I'm sniffing, or swallowing. All these things we find where it finds that there's breath going in and out at the nose, where it finds out there's sponginess in the body, where the muscles are, or the fat is, squashing, where it finds there's movement. Okay, so there are the kind of things that we are meant by body. Just a brief outline. Let's skip over to number 2. So the awareness, when it looks into our experience, we might find it's irritated feeling. We're not feeling very comfortable in the body. Or we might feel nice, air conditioning, and we'll feel very pleasant, or a bit pleasant, bit unpleasant. And it changes. And all day long, we've got this variety of feelings on the body, either on the skin or inside. Just our mood of the body moving up and down, mood of the mind. Or you can look in, we're feeling irritated, sort of angry about what someone said to us, or still excited about what's going to happen later, or feel deeply disappointed or troubled. Can't put your finger on why. So this is the feelings level, body and mind. And then this colossal, great big group here. Basically, this part of it is perception. So it's judging, assessing, identifying, just saying this is a wood, this is a light, this is a monk, this is a curtains, this is a chair. Basics, just basically identifying and then comparing things, remembering things. So when you read, you're using it, investigating and perceiving and misperceiving. Things that you can see someone, is that my soulmate? Is that an enemy? Is that who's that stranger over there? So all different kinds of things. A policeman? No, it's not, it's a dog. So sometimes make mistakes and sometimes not. Then we have the mind states, always active since we're waking, focal area. So even when you wake up first thing, you're hearing, even you didn't even open your eyes. You hear birds chirping and dogs barking, coffee grinder, or attention, intention. So these are the kind of things that we start to get aware of and start to realize what we've already got these. And they can pay attention to the body. They can pay attention to the eye and seeing, hearing, and ear, nose and smelling, taste and thinking. Loads of different types of thinking. Thinking like planning. You can be aware that we're planning. We can be aware that we're thinking of a person. It's thinking all about her, him. We can remember things that you heard in a movie. You can be thinking of places. Okay? Stuff like that. So that's the kind of thing when we start to meditate, always you start to get aware of, because it's this just based on our experience. There's no blind faith or belief in anything. And this is all based on your own experience. So this is about the Four Foundations of Mindfulness. The first one, this one, body, is also called kaya in old language, in the ancient language of the Buddha. So I just want to show you how we have experience which is made up of bits and pieces actually. When we look in, we're aware of our shoulder, we're aware of our knees, we're aware of our ankle or foot, we're aware of the head shape of our jaw, We're aware of a bit of our nose, and our experience changes around. And that's called impermanence. So it works a bit like this. So we have experiences coming and going. And and these are made up of these four things: hardness and softness, temperature, coolness and warmth, sponginess, which is where it's not actually bone, but it's actually muscle, fat, and so on, and liquids, and movement. So just movement of the stomach, moving in and out, movement of our limbs. So those overlap the four things that are represented to mean those. So you can zoom in on anywhere internally in your body, and you find those four things clustered up together somewhere, but changing. So there they are. Those are called the four elements. So all around the body, you find those coming and going, and that's all we find. And then Vedana means pleasant and unpleasant feelings. Pleasant feeling, but later on it moves and it changes and it's unpleasant. Unpleasant feeling, it changes and then it's pleasant. So all the time we get this, and neutral. And then we also have a breath, which will always confined there. It's going in and out, and we don't make any assumption about that. We don't say that the breath is the soul. As Nagasena points out, somebody says to him, the soul is the breath, and the breath is the soul. He says, what about trumpet players when they blow out the tune? It doesn't come back in again. He goes, well, does the self vanish off then? Points us out that you can't find a permanent self there. So the body just breathes because it breathes. It's just like bellows. That's just it. We don't assume more than that. The posture as well, just are you sitting, are you standing? It's not you, it's just what the body's doing. It's one or the other, and it changes. Feelings, perception. And then these two, the focal area, the intention, and just the basic battery pack. Like this computer can't work without a battery. We can't work without this facility as well, called the life pulse, just the brain rhythm, the heart pulse. But you could have a coma, they're still going, but there's nothing there. So it's just basically like a battery pack of the body. Mindfulness and unmindfulness. Always when you are separated from your object in some way, unmindfulness is there. If desire is there, you haven't got what you want. So unmindfulness is there. Always with mindfulness, if you're feeling mindful and your mind has a mind, you are content and you're collected and calm with what is. So that's one difference. Unmindfulness is always associated with agitation. And mindfulness is always associated with calm. Sometimes we have half a second of one, half a second of another, 10 seconds of the other one, and then the other one, changing. But always the middle four, always on the go. Awareness of seeing, awareness of hearing. So sometimes you might be aware of the sound of the fan or a dog barking. Sometimes you're not aware of it at all. You're off thinking, and then you come back to it. Sometimes you wonder what's going on with the projector. I always know what's going on, and I'm always in control. I'm going to plug it in again. That's okay.